Hello and welcome to another edition of This. We've looked at this, and now we're going to look at this. Unjust trade rules. Unjust trade rules look like this. Limits on exports. Rich countries keep high tariffs against the exports of poor countries, thus hampering poor country development. Rich countries force poor countries to remove their tariffs against our exports, thus denying them the chance to protect their infant industries. They are being made to cut tariffs on our goods more dramatically than we are reciprocating. It should be the other way round, because they are the ones in need of protecting their infant industries. We currently have very high tariffs on processed goods and low tariffs on raw materials. That means poor countries can't process their own goods and sell these to us, but instead have to sell us their raw materials, and we do the processing on our soil. This point is crucial because the processing is the highly profitable bit. In other words, we're reserving the juicy bits for ourselves. It's also uncompetitive for consumers here. Intellectual property rights. Poor countries are being made to pay hefty royalties on intellectual property, especially for vital medicines such as those used to treat the HIV virus. During our industrialisation, all of today's rich countries violated other countries' intellectual property laws. This facilitated technology transfer. When a country reaches a higher level of development, other countries do better out of trading with them than they would if they had kept that country poor. And it's not just medicines. This applies to all the technology that goes into development of a country. Investment measures. Rich country corporations want to set up shop inside developing countries. This can help development, but poor countries require the ability to set terms and conditions, called investment measures, which ensure that the poor country benefits from the rich country corporations' activities on their soil. Rich country corporations want to set up shop entirely on their own terms, without regard to the impact on the poor country's economy. Through the World Trade Organization and other negotiations, rich countries are forcing poor countries to abandon their investment measures. This leads to a form of economic colonization, where corporations take over poor country economies and repatriate all the profits to rich shareholders in the West. Poor countries must be permitted to use investment measures such as these. Some proportion of profits should be reinvested in business in the poor country. Linkages need to be generated with the local economy, e.g. by insisting corporations should work with local business partners and employ a certain number of local staff. Money invested in the poor country should be committed for a certain length of time rather than be able to be pulled out on a speculative whim. Limits on how much land can be owned by foreign businesses, limits on how many local businesses can be bought up by foreign businesses, and so on. The global trading system. The process of making trade rules takes place at the World Trade Organization and through bilateral agreements. At the WTO, a great deal of bullying takes place. Rich countries have far more clout and bargaining power at the WTO. Poor countries lack the resources for research and preparation for effective trade negotiations. When the WTO process stalls, rich countries try to pick off the poor countries one by one outside of the WTO through this. Rich countries are aggressively competing with countries who are in economic desperation. The result is that we lay waste to their economies. Fair trade rules would look like this. Rich countries remove their tariffs against poor country exports. Poor countries are allowed to keep their tariffs for longer so they can protect their infant industries as they develop. In particular, we should drop tariffs on processed goods so that poor countries can move from exporting cheap raw materials to higher value-added goods and thus generate much-needed revenue. Investment measures must be permitted so they can set appropriate conditions to rich corporations' involvement in their economy. Facilitate technology transfer and catch-up by allowing the third world access to Western patents and copyrights without having to pay unaffordable royalties. Note, all of these demands fall within the scope of the current market economy paradigm. If the world builds a new economy which is transformed from capitalism into something else, then some of these ideas might eventually become redundant because we'd have new ways of doing things. But for the moment, these are among the changes which need to take place to ensure that we are trading more fairly with the developing countries and least developed countries, so that the odds are no longer stacked against them.